All right, thank you all very much for tuning in. My name is Joe Young, and we are here at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety's Vehicle Research Center, and I'm joined by Becky Miller, one of our senior research engineers. In a moment, we're going to be watching a live crash test. It's going to be a side impact research test.
The system is now charging.
Our system's now charging. We'll talk about that in a second. Becky, can you walk us through what we're going to see today?
So today we're going to be looking at a 37 mile per hour crash, side crash into a Toyota Camry. We have different research barriers that we're looking at that'll be coming from behind us at 37 miles an hour and hitting the side of this Toyota Camry.
Okay, so this is a research test. As you said, it's a little bit different than our normal side impact crash test program. Can you tell us how it's different?
Sure, so our standard test is run at 31 miles an hour. Kind of a similar configuration where we have a moving deformable barrier. It's like a generic car coming down the runway into a stationary vehicle at 31 miles per hour. And the weight of that barrier is 3,300 pounds. The weight of our research barrier is heavier at 4,200 pounds because the weight of an average SUV and pickup is getting bigger and bigger. And so we're trying to replicate real world, brand new vehicle scenarios.
Gotcha. So again, this is Becky Miller. She's walking us through what we're going to see today. It's a research crash test, side impact test. We're looking at changes to our side program. Can you walk us through when our original side program was introduced in 2003?
Sure. So in 2003, we recognized that side crashes were also a problem that needed to be identified. And there were two things that we really noticed. Side structures were not strong enough, so there wasn't enough survival space if you're hit in the side, as well as the lack of airbags. So our program drove head protecting and chest protecting airbags that lessened blows when hit in the side. A lot of vehicles didn't have those features, but today almost all of the vehicles get a good rating in our current test. We know that some people are still being injured and killed on the roadways. We're trying to find new tests to develop to address those injuries.
Okay, so again, this is going to be a faster crash test than our normal side test, 37 miles per hour instead of 31. What about the barrier? The weight's heavier, right?
The weight is heavier, the speed is faster, and the characteristics of the front of the barrier we're working on as well. We know that the barrier at this higher test speed doesn't quite represent real SUVs and pickups, and so we're trying to change the geometry as well as the stiffness characteristics to get that closer to real vehicles.
Gotcha. So we've got about 2 minutes before the crash test is going to run. Our system is charging. Can you talk about the propulsion system at all and how this works?
Sure. So we actually have, it's kind of like a pulley system that the vehicle runs down the runway. We have a 600-foot long runway behind us where the vehicle is currently stationed. Oh, doors coming up. We'll wait a second.
So the vehicle is going to travel down the 600-foot runway, strike the side of the test vehicle here. Can you talk about, is this the only test we're doing, or is this a bigger research series?
This is part of a bigger research series. So we're looking at different variations, either in geometry or shape or weight and speed and all of those factors to figure out what is the right combination that best represents real vehicle-to-vehicle crashes.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got about another minute. Again, we're going to have a side impact test. My name is Joe Young. If you're just tuning in, this is Becky Miller, one of the senior research engineers at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. We just put out some new news today about changes to our side program that are coming up. Again, we've got three things that are changing, right? The weight, the speed, as well as that deformable front of the barrier, which is really what we're looking at today, right? Can you talk about what we're going to be looking at with that?
Correct. We're looking at deformation characteristics on the vehicle, so how the vehicle gets crushed, as well as the motion between the two vehicles. We know that in a real vehicle-to-vehicle crash, the vehicles tend to rotate towards each other, but our current barrier is causing a rotate away. So we're getting close.
Yeah, so
we're at the 30-second mark.
About 30 seconds. So what's happening now? We've got the lights coming on. And why do we have so much light in this room?
Well, we take a picture every 2 milliseconds during the crash. The crash might last 100 milliseconds. So we have to pump a lot of light into the area to be able to see what we need to see with the dummies and the vehicles. We have 750,000 watts of light.
Wow. So we've just got a few more seconds before the vehicle starts coming our way. So we'll go ahead and take a break and watch this live research crash test.
Charging is complete. Test will commence in 3 seconds. 2, 1. We're underway.
There you have it. It's always louder than I expect it to be, right? So again, can you tell us the speed and the weight of that barrier and what we just saw?
Sure. So you just witnessed an IIHS research crash test at 37 miles an hour with a moving deformable barrier that weighs 4,200 pounds and a research barrier face on the front. So we're researching ways that we can make our existing test reflect better the characteristics of real car-to-car crashes, especially focused on SUVs and pickups striking vehicles that we know is a real-world problem that's causing injuries and deaths on the roadways still.
So in just a moment, we're going to walk down and actually take a closer look at both the vehicle and the barrier. As Becky was explaining earlier, we're going to be looking at the interaction between the two, make sure that it's accurately representing a vehicle. Let's see, so they're just going to get cleaned up right now, correct?
Yeah, so they're securing the area for us. They're making sure there's no immediate threats or problems. They're going to be cleaning up the glass so that it's safe to walk down there for us to take our first initial evaluation.
Great, and while they're doing that, we can actually walk over here because we've got the test already replaying. We can take a look at what you maybe see, some initial impressions of this research test.
So one thing that we can take away from this video pretty quickly without having to do a whole lot of analysis is we want to look at the interaction between the vehicles, whether they're rotating towards each other initially or whether they end up rotating away from each other. And that gives us an idea of where the force is being distributed. From a first glance, it looks like it's a pretty accurate to the vehicle-to-vehicle test that we're seeing. But this is part of a larger study, so we're going to be trying out different barriers and figuring out, of all the barriers, which one gives us the right balance that best represents real crashes.
Gotcha, and of course, if folks are interested in reading more, especially about that rolling you're talking about, we've got on our website a whole news article that explains what we're doing today with some visual representations of that. So in just a moment, we'll walk down. Obviously, you can see that barrier on the front. What is the barrier front made of?
It's actually made out of aluminum honeycomb, and so it's kind of like a bunch of tin cans that are very small that crush. So if you think about that scenario, it's meant to provide a little bit of crushing space rather than a brick wall or a steel plate. It's got a little deformation, which is what would happen in a real vehicle. The front ends of vehicles have a little bit of give to them, and this can do that as well. We can change the shape. We can change the characteristics, so how big or how small the honeycombs are, how thick and what kind of materials to get stiffer and softer sections, which represent better the stiffer and softer sections of a real vehicle.
Right, so we're looking for a specific shape. We know that SUVs, when they crash into a side of a Camry, sort of make a specific shape. Can you speak about that a little bit, why that shape happens?
So because there's parts of an SUV that are much stronger, like frame rail sections, and areas where there's just grille and headlights and cosmetic parts, we know that there's areas that are punching into the side of the car more than others. They tend to create an M shape along the profile of the vehicle, and that's one thing that we're going to be looking for when we head down there.
Okay,
Ladies
wonderful.
and gentlemen, at this time, we'd like to invite you to come down on the floor and have a closer look at the vehicle.
So we are
Thank
going to head on down and take a closer look and see if we can see that deformation you were just talking about. Now, Becky, is this the last test, or do we have more work to do?
This is part of a series. So our news release that we just put out kind of summarized how we've gotten to this point. But now we're in the final stages where we're really perfecting the configuration and the barrier, and we hope to next year release a new test program.
Gotcha. All right, so here we are. We've got the test vehicle and the barrier. Tell me what you see.
So first of all, we can look at the barrier, and there's some characteristics of this aluminum honeycomb that you can see here. We want to see it deform in a certain way. We want to have some crush across the top especially. We also want to see that the barrier bumper region is crushing backwards and not flipping underneath, which is a problem that we'd seen before. So this, at first glance, looks pretty good. When we look at the vehicle, which is our main focus, We again want to see this M-shaped design on the vehicle, areas where stiffer parts of an SUV or pickup would crush more into the vehicle than other parts. And we can definitely see a well-defined M shape. We won't know the exact details of how well this performed compared to other prototypes that we're looking at until we take measurements. And that's more for this afternoon. This afternoon's devoted to the technical measurements we take with a computerized measuring arm, as well as photos and other evidence and dummy numbers that will be coming in just a few minutes.
Gotcha. So speaking of the dummies, before we go, we're changing a few things about the test, the weight, size, and the face of the barrier. Are we doing anything about the dummy configuration? No,
we're actually quite pleased with the dummies. We've been excited to use these dummies. They're small female dummies. I think often we think of crash test dummies, we think of kind of that mid-sized, large male dummies. But in the side crash environment, it is important to protect people that are shorter and smaller, that may be at higher risk of being injured when struck by SUVs and pickups. So those we're keeping the same. Much of the configuration's the same. We're really focusing on speed, weight of the MDB, as well as the geometry and the characteristics of the front end.
Okay, wonderful. Well, where can folks read more about this research?
You can head to IIHS.org to learn more about this, as well as vehicle ratings.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for tuning in. My name is Joe Young. This is Becky Miller, Senior Research Engineer here at the Institute, and we appreciate your time.